History loves simple stories. It loves turning complex human lives into clean symbols. Heroes, villains, saints, monsters. It is easier that way. Marie Antoinette became one of those symbols. For some, she is the face of excess and decadence. For others, she is a tragic victim of revolution. For many, she is just an image, powdered wigs, diamonds, Versailles, let them eat cake. But almost never is she remembered first as a human being. Marie Antoinette was born in Vienna in 1755 as Maria Antonia Josepha Joanna, the 15th of 16 children in the vast imperial family of Empress Maria Theresa. And this is only the beginning. If you enjoy thoughtful history, stay with this channel and subscribe. In a household that large, children were not raised for themselves, they were raised for function. Daughters were political tools, diplomatic currency, instruments of alliance. Love, individuality, personal destiny were luxuries that had no place in dynastic politics. Marie was never meant to be important. She was not the most intelligent of her sisters, not the most educated, not the most strategically valuable. She was gentle, musical, affectionate, emotionally warm, drawn to beauty and art more than to power. Ironically, it was precisely because other sisters died, fell ill, or lost their marriage value that Marie was suddenly elevated into a role she had never been prepared for, becoming the future Queen of France. At just 14 years old, she was sent away from Austria forever. At the border, she was forced to abandon everything: her clothes, her attendants, her possessions, even her dog, and symbolically stripped of her identity. Maria Antonia ceased to exist. Marie Antoinette was created. Her marriage to the Dauphin of France was not a union of people but a treaty between empires, meant to end centuries of rivalry between France and the Habsburg world. When she arrived at Versailles, she entered not a palace, but a system. A machine built on hierarchy, surveillance, performance, and control. Versailles had no privacy, no silence, no personal space. Eating was public. Dressing was public. Sleeping was public. Even doors could not be knocked on, only scratched, so as not to disturb etiquette. It was a world where rank mattered more than humanity, where identity dissolved into role. She was foreign, young, isolated, and constantly watched. Her marriage to Louis XVI was emotionally distant and physically unfulfilled for years, increasing pressure, humiliation, and anxiety. Yet she adapted as best she could. She found comfort in music, art, fashion, beauty, and social life, not as cruelty, but as survival. When she became queen at 18, she inherited not a stable nation but a collapsing one. France was already drowning in debt. The tax system crushed the poor. The Third Estate, nearly 90% of the population, carried the heaviest burden while possessing the least. Bad harvests, brutal winters, bread shortages, inflation, and inequality were already tearing society apart long before revolution began. Versailles existed in a different reality, not because of Marie Antoinette's personal choices, but because monarchy itself functioned through spectacle and opulence. Royal luxury was political language, a display of authority, legitimacy, and divine right. She lived inside that structure. She did not design it. But history rarely blames systems. It blames faces, and Marie Antoinette became the perfect face of inequality. The diamond necklace affair sealed her fate in public memory. Years before the Revolution, jewelers had created an impossibly expensive diamond necklace originally intended for Louis XV mistress, Madame du Barry. Before it could be sold, the king died, leaving the jewelers with an unsellable masterpiece of absurd value. They offered it to Marie Antoinette. She refused, twice, stating that France needed ships, not diamonds. Yet a con artist named Jean de la Motte forged letters and signatures, manipulated a cardinal, and orchestrated a massive fraud that made it appear as if the Queen had secretly ordered the necklace and refused to pay for it. When the scandal exploded, Marie Antoinette was legally proven innocent. Jean was convicted, but the truth no longer mattered. The story had already entered public imagination. To a starving population, the idea of a queen secretly ordering one of the most expensive jewels in Europe was enough. Facts cannot compete with symbolism. From that moment on, she became Madame Deficit, the embodiment of class divide, greed, and corruption. Every attempt to restore her image failed. She was no longer a person. She was a narrative. When the revolution came, it did not come for Marie Antoinette the woman. It came for Marie Antoinette the symbol. The storming of the Bastille, the marches, the mobs, the political collapse, all of it transformed France. But it also transformed her into an object of collective rage. When the Parisian crowd stormed Versailles and forced the royal family to leave, Marie Antoinette faced armed revolutionaries on the balcony, not with hysteria, but with composure. For a brief moment, even the crowd saw something unexpected. Not a caricature, not a monster, but a woman standing alone in front of history. After the failed escape attempt to Varennes, everything collapsed. Louis lost all credibility. The monarchy fell. The family was imprisoned. Louis XVI was executed. Marie Antoinette was left isolated, separated from her children, stripped of identity, status, and dignity. Her trial was political theater. The charges were symbolic more than factual. She was convicted not only of crimes, but of being who she represented. When she was led to the guillotine, she wore a simple white dress. Her hair was cut. Her hands were bound. Marie Antoinette wore a small miniature portrait of her son around her neck, and inside a child's glove she carried a lock of his hair, a final, silent symbol of her identity not as a queen, but as a mother. And her last recorded words were not dramatic, not defiant, not royal. She accidentally stepped on her executioner's foot and said, "Pardon me, sir. I did not do it on purpose." A small human sentence at the end of a massive historical storm. Marie Antoinette was not a saint, but she was not a monster. She did not design the system she lived in. She did not control the economic structures that collapsed France. She did not rule the political machinery of monarchy. She was a woman placed inside a role too large, too violent, too historical for any individual to survive. History later turned her into myth, icon, villain, and victim, but rarely allowed her to remain human. And that is why, at the end of this video, we don't just show her portrait, we bring her back to life. Just like we did with Mary Tudor, we animate her image, not as a queen, not as a symbol, not as propaganda, but as a woman. A real face, real eyes, real presence. Because history often kills people twice, once in reality and once in memory. And sometimes, the most radical thing we can do is simply return their humanity to them. Thank you for watching. If you value history told carefully and accurately, consider staying with this channel and subscribing. The past deserves precision as much as curiosity.